I'm at a loss for where to begin. It's devastating to realize my wife no longer wants to live with me. What's worse is her refusal to provide a reason. She's resistant to moving in with me, and my mother supports her in this decision. Allow me to provide some context. I'm a 51-year-old man who had to leave my hometown 13 years ago for work, leaving my wife, Mona, who is 48, and our 2 children in Texas. They are now 23 and 21, residing independently in Houston. Around 14 years ago, during the U.S. recession caused by the housing bubble, our business collapsed overnight. With my father's passing and me running his construction business, everything fell apart. Balancing the care of my mother, 2 school-age kids, and my wife became overwhelming in such an unstable economy. After depleting all our savings, I had no choice but to make the tough decision to move out. After exploring opportunities in various Asian countries, I eventually established my business in Dubai. Though challenging, the drive to provide for my family kept me going. After leaving Texas, it took me over a year before I could return home to establish my new venture. Since then, I visited home every 5 to 6 months. I desired to bring my family with me, but Mona and the kids were reluctant due to concerns about disrupting their schooling. Last year, when my youngest daughter finished college and secured a job, I planned to visit home to spend time with her. During that visit, I suggested to Mona that we relocate here now that the children have moved out, but she declined, fearing leaving my mother alone. I proposed bringing my mother along, but they both opposed the idea of leaving their hometown, citing the vast cultural differences in the Middle East. They had valid concerns, so I didn't press further. During my last visit home, I shared with Mona my intention to wrap up things in Dubai and return to Texas. I anticipated her excitement, but instead, she reacted unhappily. I inquired why she didn't want us to live together, and she explained she was content but puzzled why I'd leave everything behind. While she had a point about the sacrifices made to establish myself in Dubai, after 13 years away and with our children grown, I longed to return to my comfort zone. I reassured her about our finances and plans to establish something in Texas given the improved economy. However, she remained unconvinced, which raised concerns for me, though I gave her the benefit of the doubt. The next morning, my mother dropped by unexpectedly and advised against my quick decision to return. Since I hadn't shared my plans with her or anyone else, it must have been Mona who informed her. I was taken aback. Similar to Mona, my mom's concern made me doubt myself. I began to wonder if I was making a mistake and ultimately abandoned the idea. However, I couldn't shake off the distress caused by my wife's reluctance to live with me. While her reasoning might make sense, I felt devastated by Mona's emotional distance. This feeling consumed me so much that upon returning home, I reduced my calls and texts with her. I hoped she would notice and inquire, but she seemed indifferent to whether everything was okay. There were days when I didn't reach out, and she didn't either. Over time, her communication became purely transactional, indicating that she no longer relied on me. So last month, I confronted her, questioning if she still loved me. She dismissed it as overthinking, explaining that she was busy caring for the household and my aging mother. I was at a loss for words. It's uncommon for a wife to bond so well with her mother-in-law and care for them. While I appreciated Mona's kindness to my mom, my unease grew daily. I couldn't comprehend why she didn't want me home when we already had our own house. Our major responsibilities were fulfilled, and I reassured her that our lifestyle wouldn't suffer. It just didn't make sense. Yes, I considered the same possibility as you all might be thinking. Perhaps she found someone else, but how could I uncover the truth? She hadn't shown any other signs until now. She had been a fantastic mother, bravely raising our children during my absence. It wasn't easy. She fulfilled all her roles gracefully. Sometimes I feel guilty for suspecting her, but you know how challenging long-distance relationships can be. Update. Mona had been having an affair, and my mother had known all along but never told me. I can't understand why I deserved this fate. I arranged a surprise trip home without informing anyone, not even my mom. As I entered my house, I dreaded encountering Mona with her lover. It's somewhat ironic, given the stories I've heard about cheating spouses of deployed spouses. Thankfully, that scenario didn't unfold. Mona was in the kitchen when I used the spare key to enter the house. She was visibly shocked to see me. To conceal my surprise visit, I brought a bouquet. Although Mona seemed surprised, she also appeared suspicious of my unexpected arrival and bombarded me with questions. I explained that I had light work that month, prompting me to come home. Mona managed a forced smile, pretending to be pleased, but it was clearly insincere. Over the next few weeks, I painstakingly uncovered the truth. I resorted to tactics I'm not proud of, but I felt I had no choice. I snooped through her phone, listened in on her conversations, planted a GPS tracker in her car, and trailed her around town. This investigation yielded information bit by bit, painting a clear picture of what was happening in my absence. It transpired that she had been seeing someone for the past 8 years. Upon my return home, Mona was unusually guarded about her phone, unlike before when she would clean up all evidence. This time, she didn't have the chance. Although I attempted to snoop through her phone on the first day, I was unsuccessful. When I eventually gained access, I found nothing incriminating. She likely wiped it clean at the first opportunity. The affair came to light when I tracked her movements using a GPS device in her car. Initially, I didn't suspect anything when I observed her entering a hardware store. However, upon waiting for her return, I noticed the owner closing the shop. It left me feeling dizzy. Hours later, I saw Mona leaving the shop, and the owner reopened it once her car had departed. I considered entering the shop to confront her lover, but I hesitated, fearing he might recognize me and ruin my plan. I patiently waited for her next visit, hoping to catch them in the act. She typically ventured out in the afternoon, sometimes visiting my mom with friends or relatives. I followed her everywhere, hoping to catch her with her paramour. Finally, yesterday, she went to visit my mom. Ordinarily, I refrained from following her further on such occasions, which is why it took me so long to catch them. But yesterday, I remained vigilant and witnessed them leaving the house together. It didn't strike me as suspicious at the time. I assumed they were heading for shopping or some other errand. Though I initially resisted the urge to follow them, something compelled me to do so. They stopped at the hardware store, and my heart sank when I saw her lover greet them. Both Mona and my mom exited the car. Her lover kissed Mona in front of my mom, and they conversed briefly. Then, he hugged my mom before she got back in the car and drove off. Mona and her lover entered his shop, and he closed the shutter behind them. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Betrayal from one's spouse is one thing, but betrayal from one's own mother is unimaginable. The truth overwhelmed me to the point where I had to take a few moments to catch my breath before proceeding to the shop. My knocks went unanswered, so I persisted until her lover finally opened the door. I demanded to know where Mona was, and he froze. I pushed past him and stormed into the shop. Before he had a chance to respond, the lights went out, and I heard a faint voice from the storeroom. Hastily, I rushed in to find my wife lying exposed, pleasuring herself and calling out for someone else. It lasted only a moment before someone else leaped at me and dragged me out as Mona screamed loudly. The scene was so chaotic that it took me a while to grasp what was happening. I struck the intruder and broke free. By then, Mona had emerged, hastily covering herself. I seized her by the arm and demanded to know how long this had been going on, but Mona intervened, pleading for us to discuss it at home. Aware I could face consequences for the altercation, I backed off, exited, and drove away. I headed to my mom's place. Bursting inside, I shouted accusations, convinced she was aware. Mona had already informed her, as my mom's lack of surprise indicated. She simply cried and held my hand, urging me to calm down. I collapsed emotionally. Soon, Mona joined us. Seeing her face only fueled my anger. I implored them both to tell me the truth. After much prodding, Mona confessed to feeling deeply lonely during my absence, for 13 years. I had been so consumed with work that I had little time for her. My calls were brief check-ins about the kids and mom. But what about me? I demanded to know how long this had been going on. She admitted, perhaps 7 or 8 years. Shocked, I felt like a fool. I had toiled abroad for years to provide for my family, only to find this betrayal waiting for me at home. I questioned why she hadn't sought a divorce if our connection had deteriorated so much. She broke down again, insisting she loved me, and the affair was solely to alleviate her loneliness. He meant nothing to her, she claimed. I couldn't believe it. I turned to my mom, asking how I deserved such betrayal from her. She wept, pleading for understanding, explaining Mona had been caring for her. Once I had all the answers, I rose to leave. They tried to stop me, but I warned them not to. I instructed Mona not to return home, needing time alone. Driving back, I felt nauseous, unsure how to process it all. Was this affair truly my fault for sacrificing so much for my family? Update. I spent the following days deeply immersed in sorrow. Afterwards, I drove to Houston to see my grown daughters. They weren't children anymore. They deserved to know what their mother had been doing while I provided for them. I also did it to protect myself. My intention was to leave the country, fearing Mona might manipulate my daughters against me. They were devastated by the truth. The older one even suspected Mona and my mom were up to something. She also mentioned suspecting my mom of seeing a widower nearby. However, that was not my concern. My dad had passed away years ago, so my mom could do as she pleased. Yet, she supported Mona, causing problems for me. The following day, I packed up and returned home. Mona and Mom had been calling incessantly. Since then, I think they came home to find an empty house, facing reality. Initially, I left them for a month. The calls and texts were filled with apologies, pleading for my return. But eventually, they became concerned about money. I intentionally didn't block them, wanting to see their anxiety. Without funds, I froze my bank accounts and credit card. They panicked, realizing they had no income. Mom's state pension wasn't enough to sustain their lifestyle. They tried everything to reach me, but I ignored them. Mom resorted to emotional manipulation, claiming my late father would be heartbroken. Their pleas fell on deaf ears. I never suspected Mona. I never checked her phone like people in long-distance relationships do, but I always respected her privacy more than Mona. I felt betrayed by my mom sometimes, especially when I sensed something was off with Mona. Witnessing their strong bond made me feel betrayed in return. Their excuse for covering up Mona's affair was weak. Feeling lonely, she chose to cheat? She felt alone despite having family and friends around? Compared to her, I was lonelier, literally alone in a foreign land. I could have done the same, but I didn't. I was focused on my family's well-being, working hard to save and return home. When their attempts to contact me failed, they reached out to my daughter for help. Mona didn't know I had told the truth to the girls, and she did exactly what I expected. She spoke ill of me in front of them, alleging I had cut them off financially or was having an affair. However, my daughters saw through her lies and confronted her, driving her away that day. But Mona continued to reach out to my younger daughter, exploiting her innocence for money. However, I won't intervene. She's an adult who knows what to do. Mom has also reached out to my daughter for financial help. As for me, I'm still unable to move on from the feeling of betrayal. I haven't considered divorce yet. Divorce would be financially and personally beneficial for Mona if she wants to marry someone else. However, I won't pursue it. She's already living in my house, and that's the most she can get from me. Being out of the country with no accountability, whether divorced or not, doesn't matter to me. I'm focused on moving on with my life. Update. After cutting off their financial support, they exhausted all possible resources. While my older daughter refused to assist, the younger one was manipulated into helping. However, her earnings from her low-paying first job barely cover her essentials. Despite this, she's saving some to assist her mother, which made me proud. Eventually, she became overwhelmed and suggested Mona find employment to support herself. But Mona took her assistance for granted, insisting it was her daughter's duty to care for her. Despite doing her best with her limited income, my younger daughter reached her breaking point and ceased providing support. Unable to marry someone new while still married to me, Mona has been pressuring me for a divorce. She's threatened legal action, but I'm unfazed. Being abroad, I doubt she has the resources or knowledge to pursue legal action across borders. Plus, in this country, there are no legal consequences for abandoning a cheating spouse. So, good luck to her with that. Currently, Mona works at her partner's shop, though I'm unsure of her compensation, whether it's money or something else. Her partner doesn't even have a proper home, residing in a camper, and his financial situation seems inadequate to support Mona, as far as my mom is concerned. Sometimes, I feel guilty for cutting her off and consider helping her out. However, she receives a pension that should suffice for her needs. She brought this situation upon herself. Perhaps I'll reconcile with her in the future, but not now. Although she's apologized, it didn't feel sincere. I'll wait until she truly regrets her actions and my anger subsides, allowing love to prevail. Some advise me to move on and enjoy the vibrant lifestyle of Dubai, but it's not all as glamorous as portrayed on social media. It requires a substantial amount of money. Moreover, the legal landscape regarding women is stringent here, and I'm not interested in using women to cope with my grief. However, I've been traveling extensively since then, exploring places like China and Bali, with plans to visit more Asian countries and experience their cultures.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
My name is Craig Johnson, and I've been married for 17 years to Carolyn, who I believed loved me deeply. I'm completely lost now because she's been having an affair for 6 years with her boss, who runs the real estate agency where she works. We have 3 children, a 16-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old son, and our youngest, a lovely 2-year-old girl. I adore all of them, but my feelings for my wife have changed. By the way, I almost forgot to mention, I'm a detective sergeant in the police force. Around 2 months back, my youngest daughter had an accident at daycare, and since my wife couldn't pick her up, it was up to me to save the day. I rushed over in my unmarked police car, lights flashing, to find her with just a minor sniffle and a lollipop in her mouth. After checking on her and giving her a kiss, which she loves unlike her older siblings who can't stand it, I made her laugh before going to speak with the daycare manager. She informed me that my daughter, Gidget, had a pretty bad cut on her calf, and that an ambulance had been called. I stayed by my daughter's side, keeping her spirits up until the EMTs arrived and recommended stitches at the emergency room. Despite trying to reach my wife and getting her voicemail, I tracked her phone using a locator app, only to find it at a hotel just 7 miles away. After my daughter got her stitches, I prepared the car seat and took her to confront my wife. My gut was churning from lunch as we pulled up to the hotel, just in time to see my wife, Carolyn, and her boss, Arthur Dash, looking overly familiar and intimate with each other. They were laughing, and she kissed him with a passion that should have been reserved for me. I recorded them on my dash cam as they continued their display of affection, with Arthur's hand wandering in a way I'd never seen with Carolyn, who always refused to wear stockings publicly for me. Watching them confirmed my worst fears. It was over between us. They shared another laugh and kiss before she drove off in her Lincoln Aviator. All of a sudden, her car's brake lights flashed, and she came to a quick stop. Her car just sat there for a moment, and then my phone started ringing. I saw it was from her. "Hello, Carolyn," I said without showing any emotion. "What's going on? Where are you?" she asked. "I'm at the hospital. The little one's fine, but where are you?" "I couldn't get through to your phone." "Oh, I'm at work, heading to the hospital now," she replied. "Drive safely," I said and hung up. I observed her car as she tried calling me 2 more times, but I ignored them, letting them go to voicemail. She then drove off, narrowly missing a truck, and I couldn't help but smirk as I headed home. Once home, I carefully carried my sleeping daughter inside. Then, I went back for 4 DNA test kits, took a sample from Gidget, sealed it, and labeled the bag. After settling Gidget, I grabbed an iced tea and called my boss to request the rest of the week off for some family issues. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Just need to sort out some medical stuff for my kids," I explained. "All right, just keep me updated," he said. "Will do, Chief." About 20 minutes later, my wife arrived. Seeing her made me feel sick, but I took a deep breath and tried to count to 10. I didn't make it past 7 before she burst through the door asking, "Where's the baby?" in a panic. I told her to calm down, that our daughter was asleep. She brushed past me and went straight to our daughter's room. Meanwhile, I began planning my next steps, finding a divorce lawyer, hiring a private investigator, and visiting an electronics store. She stormed back to me, demanding to know what happened. I explained that our daughter had fallen, but was fine now, with only 4 stitches that wouldn't likely scar. "Why didn't anyone call me?" She raised her voice at me. I calmly told her that both the daycare and I had tried to reach her, but couldn't. She claimed she was in a meeting and had turned her phone off to avoid interruptions. I mentioned that she could have set her phone to vibrate instead, adding that it was fortunate the situation wasn't more serious with the kids or, worse, something fatal involving me. Her expression changed drastically, turning pale as the implication set in. She admitted she hadn't considered that possibility, Of course you didn't, I thought to myself. Right then, our other two kids came home from school, Marissa, who was 16, and Craig Jr., who was 12. They stopped in the living room and looked at us. "What's going on, Dad?" my son asked. "My son, your sister tripped at daycare and cut herself. She needed stitches at the hospital, and I was there with her," I explained. "And you, Mom? Where were you?" Marissa asked. "I was in a meeting," she replied quietly. It was clear Marissa thought her mom was hiding something. Craig Jr., or Junior as we call him, stared at his mom. "Really, Mom?" he questioned. Carolyn looked uncomfortable and her face turned red. "I need to take a shower," she said. "Didn't you already take one this morning?" I asked, pretending to be clueless. She got flustered and glared at me, trying to make me feel guilty. "Drop it, Craig," she snapped and went upstairs. I looked at my kids and saw they were upset. "It's all right, guys. It's just a minor argument," I reassured them. "If you say so, Dad," Marissa said, while Junior just shook his head. "How about we get some pizza?" I suggested. I ordered pizza, and 30 minutes later, we had 2 large pizzas, 1 pepperoni and 1 mushroom. The kids started eating, including little Gidget, and we waited for their mom. She showed up and immediately acted displeased. "I only like anchovies," she complained angrily. So I said, "Sue me," and she gave me a fiery glare before going to get some wine. The kids were quietly laughing and sneaking glances at their mom. She left the room in a huff, and the kids and I talked about their day at school and other happenings. Later, it felt as cold as if it were midnight in the South Pole, and I needed an extra blanket. It had been 3 months since we were close. Things were about to get even tougher. The next day, I met with a lawyer to discuss my choices. She had no sympathy for cheaters, particularly wives, and was supportive of police officers. She informed me our state doesn't blame either party in divorces, but warned me I could end up in a bad financial situation unless my wife was cooperative. She advised me to collect as much evidence as possible for our case. She also mentioned that financially, I might not be in a bad position since my wife earns more, and that my eldest daughter could choose whom she wants to live with because of her age. I then hired a private investigator I trusted to watch my wife and her friend, knowing it wouldn't be too expensive and would provide me with the evidence I needed. After that, I bought some wireless microphones and 3 video cameras from an electronics store. I installed the cameras in our bedroom, the living room, and the guest room when I got home. I planned to place 1 recorder in her car, another on a bookcase in our living room, and the last one in our main bedroom. Then, my wife texted me saying she'd be home late and asked me to take care of the kids until she arrived. So, I picked up Gidget and headed home to make dinner. A couple of hours later, my 2 older kids came home, and we talked about what to have for dinner. I suggested grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and creamed spinach. Marissa thought it sounded delicious. Junior gave me a sly look and asked, "What's Mom having?" I responded that Mom could sort out her own dinner. Marissa and Junior exchanged glances. Then Marissa said, "Dad, we need to have a chat." I braced myself, thinking they were going to give me a stern talking to, and we all went to the kitchen to start making dinner. Marissa voiced her concerns, saying, "Dad, I think Mom's cheating. She's disrespecting you, and she's never here when we need her." Junior agreed, adding, "We're lucky to have both good looks and brains, no matter who we got them from." I paused what I was doing and pulled them in for a big hug, soon joined by their little sister exclaiming, "Me too, me too." I told my children I loved them more than anything, a sentiment I've always shared with them. They might find it cheesy, but they loved hearing it. I admitted things weren't looking great and I was looking into what their mom was up to, but I stressed that my love for them was unwavering. "We'll get through this," I assured them. Junior then suggested getting cheek swabs for a DNA test, thinking it might help my case. He clarified it wouldn't change how I felt about them, but might shed some light on the situation. "Junior's got a point, Dad. I'm feeling pretty distant from her right now." I was shocked, but I really felt sorry for them. "All right, we'll get the cheek swabs done before she comes back." I collected cheek swabs from them and then from myself. I packed them up and put them in my briefcase. The next day, I took them to an outside lab and asked for an expedited analysis. It cost a bit more, but I needed the results fast. About a week and a half later, the results came in. Turns out, none of the kids were biologically mine. Her company throws a big Independence Day party at the boss's place every year. I really didn't want to attend, but I was told I had to. She's a big deal in sales at her company and needed to show up. By then, I had gathered all the evidence against her and her affair: tapes, photos, recordings, videos, receipts, and the DNA test results. I just hadn't decided on the best way or time to confront her. It felt like I was going to lose no matter what, but I still went. She mentioned it wasn't for families, so the kids couldn't come. Looking back, that was probably for the best. We arrived just after 11 a.m., grabbed a couple of drinks, white wine for her, beer for me. She wore a yellow sundress without a bra, high heels, and a shawl, and she looked nice. I kept close to her, not exactly following her every move, but keeping an eye on her. Her friend came over, chatted her up, whispered to her, and then went back to hosting. He left, and I kept a closer watch on Carolyn. She started looking around after her third glass of wine, losing track of me. She's not great with alcohol and was nearing her limit. I saw her take another wine and sneak off to the far end of the lot where the house was. A couple of her work friends tried to distract me, but I had switched to soda after my beer. They had a bit too much to drink, but I was able to follow her as she walked to the side of the garden shed and vanished behind it. I set my soda down on a table, took out my phone, and turned on the video recording. I sneaked around the corner of the shed, staying out of view until I reached the back gate. Peeking around, I caught sight of my wife with her dress pulled down to her waist, exposing herself to the sunlight and air, making noises. An idea hit me, and I silently thanked my lucky stars for this unexpected opportunity. I stopped recording and took a few photos instead. Then, I grabbed the guy's ridiculous hair bun, yanked him away from my wife, and landed a punch on his face that broke his nose and cheekbone and injured my hand in the process. He fell unconscious, and Carolyn collapsed against the shed. I handcuffed him to a fence post and started reading him his rights, declaring him under arrest for offense. Carolyn started screaming, asking what I was doing. I continued reciting his rights, including the right to an attorney. By now, Carolyn was freaking out and trying to get up. I dialed 911 on my phone and waited for an answer. When they picked up, I was ready to report the emergency. I'm Detective Craig Johnson, badge number 714. I'm currently at 6132 Larson Street, detaining a suspect for offense. I urgently need additional police officers, a supervisory officer, and an ambulance here. There's a house party happening. Carolyn was furious, insisting it wasn't what it looked like and denied any wrongdoing. I told Carolyn firmly that this was a serious offense. I have video, audio, photos, documents, detailed records of her whereabouts, and DNA evidence from our 3 children proving they're not biologically mine. She must cooperate, or she risks losing any contact with her children. Carolyn turned pale, slumped to the ground, and cried out in denial. I helped her up and covered her with her shawl, warning her again. She weakly asked for her undergarments. I pointed out she hadn't needed them moments before and advised leaving them as evidence for the investigators. I helped her stand up despite her cries and difficulty breathing, and we moved towards the patio. The party guests grew silent and then looked on in shock, making way for us. I guided her to an empty lounge chair to sit. Her 2 drunken friends came over, demanding to know what happened. I explained that it was their boss who offended her. Donna screamed in disbelief, while Laura was equally shocked, revealing they thought Carolyn was in an open marriage with my consent. I corrected them, stating that was a lie. Right then, the police arrived. I led 2 officers to the shed to ensure they found the suspect, doubting he had understood my initial report. The shift sergeant arrived with another officer, and I instructed them to take statements and contact details from Donna and Laura. The guy's wife pushed through the people around to find out what had happened. The sergeant told her that her husband was arrested for offense, and as she learned the details, she lost her temper completely. She tried to go after Carolyn, who was by this point in a very bad state. The police had to hold her back just as the paramedics arrived. I explained the situation to them, and they put Carolyn on a stretcher, advising them to take her to the hospital for an examination. Then, they brought Arthur out, his face swollen and hands tied behind him. He claimed that there was a mutual agreement, and the relationship was consensual, which only made things worse when his wife overheard and confronted him furiously. She threatened legal action before being held back again. I went with them to the hospital and filled out the necessary paperwork since Carolyn was technically still my wife. Afterwards, I went to the police station to officially report Arthur. Since it was the weekend, he wouldn't see a judge until Monday. He attempted to get in touch with his lawyer, but his wife had already taken action. Returning to the hospital, I visited Carolyn, who was clearly having a tough day and looked terrible. She brightened a little when she saw me, but became frightened when she saw my expression. I confronted her about how long her affair had been going on. She broke down, admitting it was just a brief affair that wasn't supposed to last. I angrily got close to her and reminded her that none of our kids were biologically mine, highlighting our 17 years of marriage and questioning her actions, given her success in her career. Her tears quickly changed to a smug expression as she dried her eyes. "Because I can. You're the detective. Figure it out. I can have any man I want, and you're clueless." Seeing my soon-to-be ex-wife act this way made something inside me break. My expression turned icy as I looked through her, making her feel the weight of my disappointment. She seemed to visibly age and withdraw into herself, questioning her actions. I took her by the arm, led her to our car, and helped her into the passenger seat before driving to her parents' place. She looked out the window blankly until we arrived. Confused, she asked why we were there, expressing a desire to return home. I dismissed her plea, helped her out, and walked her to the front door. Upon ringing the bell, her father appeared. I informed him that his daughter needed to stay with them for a bit, and that I would return the next day to explain, mentioning her hospital visit and asking for his care. He gave me a puzzled look, but I left without further discussion. Turning off my phone, I went back home to face our children's questions about their mother's whereabouts. I explained she was staying with her grandparents for some time, and shared a simplified version of the events, leaving out the distressing details. They were upset, but understood my actions, though they struggled with her reasons. I gathered all the evidence I had collected against her, including reports, recordings, and the DNA test results. I prepared 4 sets of this evidence, specifically highlighting the DNA findings. Then, I contacted my attorney to start the divorce proceedings, request a restraining order based on the evidence, and shared the DNA results with them. Finally, I visited the husband of the woman my wife was involved with to discuss the situation with his wife, Lorna. I said sorry for the disturbance, and she kindly empathized with our shared predicament. I handed her the documents I had prepared and suggested she use them as she saw fit. She seemed overwhelmed, but expressed her gratitude. After that, I headed back home. I made a stop at my wife's parents' house and handed another set of documents to my future ex-father-in-law, pointing out his daughter's issues and urging him to seek help for her. Without waiting for a response, I left. The following day, we attended church and afterwards went to Denny's for breakfast. I kept my phone turned off for the entire day and night. On Monday, I went to work to find out when my wife would be arraigned. I attended the court session, where her lawyer argued the encounter was consensual, dismissing any allegations of offense. They brought in statements from 2 women who were at the party. The judge seemed skeptical about the proceedings, but decided to dismiss the charges conditionally, allowing for the possibility of reopening the case if new evidence emerged. The man appeared smug as he left the courtroom, but his satisfaction was short-lived as he was served with legal papers and a restraining order from his wife's lawyer. I left the courthouse feeling somewhat vindicated. Back home, I reviewed the results of the forensic examination, the police report, and the DNA findings from the examination kit. The results identified the biological father of my supposed daughter. As I was discussing these developments with my attorney over the phone, I heard a knock at the door. Unlike most, this person knocked instead of ringing the bell. Sure enough, it was my brother-in-law, Anthony. He was only a few years older than Carolyn, owned a construction business, and was rumored to have vague connections to organized crime. A few years ago, his son faced drug charges, and I helped navigate the legal system to resolve the matter almost entirely legally, followed by getting him into a rehabilitation program. Now, he's thriving in seminary. Given our history, I was well regarded by Anthony, so I suspected this visit wasn't just for catching up. Tony walked past me and was warmly welcomed by my children, who adore him, his wife Teresa, and their 3 kids. After escaping their enthusiastic embraces, he suggested we talk on the back porch. There, He expressed his confusion and concern about Carolyn's erratic behavior at her parents' place, and mentioned how upset her father was. He was curious if she had shared anything with me, especially since she became defensive after their father brought up the documents I had provided. Tony was in the dark because his father wouldn't share the documents with him. I explained that Carolyn had been unfaithful for 17 years, and biologically, none of the children were mine. I told him I was unsure about the paternity of Marissa and Junior, and that Carolyn likely didn't know either. I revealed that the father of Gidget is her current boss, Arthur Dash, and that Carolyn had contracted gonorrhea and was pregnant, but the child wasn't mine. I mentioned that her father had all the evidence except for the forensic examination results and the police report, which my lawyer had. I informed him that Carolyn would be legally notified this week. Tony sat down, visibly shaken by the news. He asked if there was any chance of reconciliation, but understood when I indicated there was none. I recounted how the charges against Arthur were dropped, but he was immediately faced with legal actions from his wife, who also received information from me. I emphasized that my intention wasn't to hurt Carolyn's parents with the harsh truth, but to prevent misinformation, stressing Carolyn's need for psychological help. Tony acknowledged the situation was shocking. Before leaving, he inquired about my plans for dealing with Arthur. I admitted I was at a loss, wanting to act but aware of the repercussions. Tony assured me he would handle the situation, looking me directly in the eyes with determination. "You're still considered family. This won't come back to haunt you. I won't harm my sister, but he will face consequences. This will settle things between us," Tony assured. I urged him not to take any action. "Do what?" he asked, then left before I could respond further. My wife was officially notified at her parents' on Thursday, which overwhelmed her to the point of fainting, necessitating a visit to the hospital. She was admitted for about a week before returning to her parents. Later, her father sought me out, questioning if there was any possibility for reconciliation. I was incredulous, pointing to the evidence I had provided. "Mistake?" I retorted, highlighting the gravity of her actions over trivial errors. I was relieved the children were not present to hear the exchange with their grandfather. Calming down, I insisted she proceed with the divorce. He left, clearly upset with the situation. Notably, after being notified of the legal proceedings, she vanished 3 weeks ago, missing a crucial legal appointment. It was revealed she owned the majority of Dash Realty, which made her less concerned about the proceedings, adjusting her legal strategy to claim abandonment. The divorce was delayed, now requiring a year due to her pregnancy and the need to wait 7 more months for a resolution. Throughout this period, her legal team pushed for a better settlement, arguing she deserved more. I had proposed she keep the house and receive a 10% financial settlement along with her retirement account and our joint savings. Visits were limited to once every 2 months at her parents' house, with no male or female friends allowed, and Marissa wasn't included since she didn't want to see her. Her attorney disagreed with nearly all the terms. I asked my attorney to arrange a discussion. Arriving early at my attorney's office, I set up a DVD in the projector, grabbed a coffee, and sat down. When Carolyn and her lawyer arrived, he introduced himself, and she reached out to shake hands. I dismissed the gesture, stating I already knew who she was and saw no need for pleasantries. I gave her lawyer a stern look when he suggested we remain polite, causing him to falter. They attempted to negotiate, but after 4 hours, we hadn't agreed on anything. I had rejected all their proposals and even rescinded some of my offers. Then, Carolyn accused me of being unreasonable. That's when I revealed my trump card. I proposed a deal: answer one question honestly, and I might reconsider. I pressed play on the DVD player, showing footage from my police car's dash cam of Carolyn and her affair partner leaving a hotel, a moment she hadn't known was captured. I paused the video as she took out a pair of blue lace underwear, leaving her pale and speechless. I confronted her about her so-called meeting and questioned the whereabouts of the underwear she had for our anniversary. I warned that unless she agreed to the divorce terms as they were, I'd take everything to court and make it public. I insisted she sign the agreement. She began to cry, quickly took a pen, and signed all the documents. Her lawyer was shocked as she got up, grabbed her purse, and then her water broke. She started crying out loud. We called an ambulance and she was taken to the hospital. I ensured that my name wasn't listed as the father on the birth certificate. She had a baby boy weighing 6 pounds, 7 ounces. We demanded a DNA test through my lawyer, and sure enough, the baby wasn't mine. Furthermore, the baby wasn't her lover's either. She had been unfaithful to him as well. The divorce was finalized, and I was free at last. Suddenly, I found myself quite popular in the dating scene. My daughter joked that I was now considered a catch. My son humorously warned me to be careful, suggesting I might be too attractive. I visited my brother-in-law, and we shared some beers. I curiously inquired about her lover's whereabouts, but dropped the subject quickly. I went on a few dates, but my heart wasn't really in it. 2 years later, Tony and Teresa hosted a barbecue, inviting everyone, including my ex-wife. The kids kept their distance from her and the man she brought. However, her son was quite the charmer, winning over my daughters. My 18-year-old daughter brought a boyfriend who seemed decent enough. I secretly approved of him. The man accompanying my ex-wife seemed overly interested in my daughter, making me uncomfortable. I was close to stepping in when her boyfriend showed up, diffusing the situation with a casual greeting. "Mind your own business, kid. The lady and I were just chatting," he retorted. "Oh, don't worry about me," the young man replied. "I'm just making sure she doesn't end up hurting you." He then inappropriately touched her. "Take your hands off me," she demanded firmly. "Come on, you know you enjoy it," he insisted. She then struck him in the throat and caught his hand, causing his thumb to bend backwards, break, and his scream caught everyone's attention. "I didn't inherit my mother's lack of principles, you creep," she declared. Her boyfriend couldn't hide his pride. "That's my kind of girl," I silently approved. Her mother hurried over, demanding to know what happened. My brother-in-law, having witnessed the entire scene, stepped in and suggested, "I think it's best if you two leave now." After their departure, the atmosphere at the party calmed down. Then, a new guest arrived. My sister-in-law excitedly greeted a stunning brunette who was tall, with a slim figure and long legs. She had the wholesome look of the girl next door, complemented by hazel eyes speckled with gold. She was breathtaking, at least to me. My son nudged me gently in the side. "Dad, stop staring," he said with a smile. "What do you mean?" I replied, puzzled. Then my sister-in-law brought the gorgeous woman over to introduce us. "Kurt, meet my sister, Angelina O'Malley." Oh no, I thought, all the great ones are already spoken for. She had recently moved to our area, was a mother to a 10-year-old boy, and a lawyer looking for a fresh start after her husband passed away. Teresa gave me a meaningful look and mentioned, "I've filled her in about you. You two might be able to support each other." Angie gave me a hopeful look and suggested, "Let's give it a shot."